Hello, everybody. Welcome. We'll get started here in 1 second.
All right. I want to give it one more minute. I see that we have at one person on the line. Is that right, Simone?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome. My name is Bob O'Sullivan. I'm the associate publisher for Test Prep at McGraw-Hill. We are now, this is the first of 15 or so subject-specific webinars we're going to be doing this year. I can't believe we're actually starting them off in February. I guess the tests are pretty early this year, so welcome. Before we begin, I just wanted to start with a couple of housekeeping items before I turn it over to Amanda. This is primarily a student-focused review session, so both teachers and students are welcome. But it is primarily based for the students in order to, hoping to get that highest score in May. You can feel free to ask questions during your session. We were going to ask you to limit your questions to the Q&A feature, but judging by the amount of people on the line, I think we're going to be just fine. If you have any, Luna, if you have any questions as we go through, hopefully some more people will be coming in. I know it's toward the end of the school day and in the middle of the day in some parts of the country. So feel free to ask anything as we make our way through the webinar. If somebody has already asked a question, the same question that you have, press the thumbs up icon. Again, maybe don't foresee that being a major problem. No student data is being collected, so if we do have some students that log on a little bit, keep in mind that it's not a risk. We're not collecting any data for anyone under the age of 18. And please participate. There is some polling and some good questions, some multiple choice questions as we go through the subject matter. So please feel free to play along. And most importantly, for this session, the session is being recorded. So for anyone who's listening on the recording, welcome. Luna or any of the other participants, please feel free to recommend this to your colleagues and students throughout your school in AP World. We do want this to be a resource that's shared out there in the world, even for those who can't make it live. So that's, if you want to quickly take a screenshot of that bit.ly, that address at the bottom, that will take you directly to the recording. I think we popped them up within 24 hours, so they should be available by tomorrow. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Amanda Bader. Amanda, welcome, and thank you for running today's session.
Hi, thank you for having me. We will run through quite a few things today, so I will try to get as much coverage as possible while still giving you some super helpful tips and tricks to be as successful as possible on this year's AP World History Modern exam. So a few quick things about me. This is my 22nd year teaching. I'm out in New Mexico, so far away from some of you. And I've taught AP classes for more than half of that. I teach AP World, obviously, and I also teach AP Language and Composition. And for the last 12 years, I have also worked as a reader in the summer scoring AP exams. So a lot of what I hope to share with you today is the insight that I have gained and that I try to instill into my own students about what we see, what I see thousands of every summer, and how to, again, be as successful as possible, get as many points as possible. So hopefully by the end of this, you do have a few things that you can take away to practice between now and May 11th, when you will take the AP World History exam. So let's talk about the format of the exam first. And I'm sort of assuming, starting from the place that We all know not much about the exam, and so please bear with me if you've already done several practice runs. But the structure of the exam, there are 4 major parts. Multiple choice is what you will do for the first 55 minutes of the exam. There are 55 questions. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is how to manage your time during the exam and why doing some timed practice is so important to your overall success. The multiple choice portion is 40% of your overall score. So I will also talk to you about how to sort of bank as many points as possible here. Again, the goal is to get as many points possible by the end of the exam, okay? The second portion are the SAQs, the short answer questions. You will answer 3 questions. You have 40 minutes to answer those 3 questions, and this is 20% of your overall score. So this is really a place to get a lot of return. You're gonna write 1 sentence and potentially get a point, okay? So it's a super important, critically important part of the exam. The DBQ is the one that every single person answers because they're going to give you 1 question. There's no choice, and you have 7 documents. And because they give you the 7 documents, almost everybody gets something on the page. You have an hour to complete this portion, and it's 25% of the overall exam. And then by then you're exhausted and you can't believe you have to do 1 more thing. And there's 1 more. And for some reason, this was not approved by a psychologist. I'm sure they've left the last essay to be called the long essay question, as if you're not already tired and wondering about the choices you've made in your life to get to this point. But you will have 40 minutes and you have a choice of questions. You'll have 3 choices and you'll pick 1. So one of the things we'll also talk about today is how to make some good choices in these places on the exam where you do have a choice about what questions to answer. All right, so what are these questions about now that we know how the exam is structured? The material on the exam, the course was restructured several years ago. Everything on the exam will be from around 1200 to 2001. And those are broken into 4 different time periods. Nothing on the exam will ask you specifically about what happened in the world prior to 1200, but it's important that you understand that world history didn't start in 1200. So the first several chapters of the review book do tell you sort of what's going on around the world. And it is important to know that and to be able to connect to that, especially in your essay responses, okay? So the oldest history, 1200 to 1450, is the least tested material on the exam. And then the other 3 time periods are relatively equal in the portion of the overall exam that they represent. Okay, so it is important to know some things, some specific evidence and some specific historical developments from each of the time periods. Okay, so in general, what do you need to do to be successful? And this is true for not just the AP World History exam, but for lots of standardized testing, okay? If you have not yet done a timed test, you need to do that, okay? You have just over 2 months until the exam, but you need to know what it feels like to persevere and to push through and to sit for 55 minutes and answer multiple choice questions and then to move directly into essay writing. You don't want the first time you experience that to be when it counts, okay? So there are 3 practice exams available in the book. Use one of them this weekend, right? Set aside the time and run yourself through the timed practice, okay? The second thing that's very important is that you must answer everything. Don't leave anything blank. There are no penalties for wrong answers, but if you don't answer, you can't get any points, okay? I don't teach math for lots of reasons, but even I know that a 0 kills an average. And if you don't answer the LEQ, for example, that 15% of your score is now a 0. That doesn't work well, even if you really did well on the DBQ. You can't put all of your eggs in any one basket. You need to earn points in every section, which means you must answer every section, okay? One of the things that I've learned over the years, and this is true of my own daughters who took AP tests and exams as well, is that we have this idea of perfection and everybody wants 100. And I think this comes from like 2nd grade spelling tests or something, like our goal is to get 100. That's not a real thing, not in life and certainly not on an AP exam. So the sooner you allow yourself to let go of the idea that you're going to get every question right, the more successful you're going to be. You're going to get questions wrong. So if you get to even a series of questions on the multiple choice and you feel like you're struggling and you feel like you got 3 or 4 in a row wrong, it doesn't matter. Keep going. Don't give up. Don't get disheartened. Keep going, because I promise you'll earn more points later, okay? You're not going to get them all right. It's okay to be wrong. This test obviously covers historical content, okay? But it also importantly tests skills, okay? Some of those skills include what College Board calls sourcing or contextualization. And those appear not only in the multiple choice questions, but are points on the rubric for the essays. So you need to be able to do this for almost every material that you encounter. You can start practicing this every day, okay? As you're reviewing a section, you can stop when you get to the bottom and you can write a sourcing statement. Who is speaking? What do you know about them? How is who they are change their view of the world? What happened before this? That would be contextualization. What led to this? So the more you sort of incorporate those skills into your thinking about the historical content, again, the more successful you're likely to be on the exam. And then finally, this is true again this year because we're back to paper and pencil tests, but you don't have to answer everything in order. Okay, so if, for example, you get to a particular part of the exam and you think, oh, I have no idea how to answer this question, don't spend 5 minutes staring at it, because on no part of the exam do you have 5 minutes to sit and stare at something. There's not that much time. Move to the next question. Often, when something percolates in your brain for a little while, you think of something else to say, or you think of something else that can help you to move forward. But if nothing else, you're not wasting time. You're going to move on, answer the next question, and then you can go back, okay? Because of who I am as a person, and I am not a lucky person. If you're doing this on the multiple choice, please make sure you have a system that makes sure that you've gone back and answered every question. Okay, so I'm not telling you to not answer things. What I'm saying is if you get stuck, if you don't know what a map means, move to the next set of questions, but then make sure you go back. The other thing that does is it leaves your guessing for the questions that you didn't know how to answer in the first place, right? You don't want to waste a bunch of time staring at a question that you're not sure how to answer. And then maybe the questions later in the exam you do know how to answer, but you've run out of time. Okay, so give yourself permission to move around if you need to. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about the things that I have learned over the summers, first in Colorado, then in Utah, and then most recently in Kansas City, where we sit for 2 weeks and I literally grade and read thousands of responses, okay? So the biggest struggles that we see are when a student simply doesn't answer the question that is asked. Sometimes they give us pages and pages and pages, but they haven't actually answered the question, okay? So the one place I will always ask you to slow down on the exam is in reading the question. And this is where some active reading helps. Mark all over that sucker. Okay, circle the action verbs, circle the task verbs. What is it that they're asking you to do? What time period is it from? It's heartbreaking to read an essay that is beautiful and is in the wrong time period, therefore it doesn't count. That's like dagger in the heart, okay? So pretty please with sugar on top, make sure you've really clearly understood every part of the question and that your answer is appropriate for those parts, okay? We've already talked about leaving things blank. Please don't, okay? One of the things to keep in mind is that on the essays, you can certainly get partial credit. You can get just the point for thesis. You can get just the point for evidence. You can get just the point for contextualization. So if you are unsure how to answer the essay as a whole, but you know something about the topic, put that something on the page. You might get a point or two. Okay, so really don't leave anything blank. And then the final thing, and this is true for the writing in particular, the longer essays, the DBQ and the LEQ, is not making clear the connections. And this I know is a function of by the time you're writing these essays, you're tired, it's the end of the exam, and you're just running out of energy. But if you don't connect the list of evidence that you're providing somehow to the question or make it clear, then it's really difficult to give those extra points, okay? The points for evidence beyond the document, for example, or for sophistication complexity, okay? So what can you do to make sure that you don't make any of those sort of common errors? Please know your geography, okay? If the question asks you about South Asia and you answer about China, you can't get points because China is in fact not South Asia. Okay, so make sure you know the regions. And again, these are in the College Board material. If you're on AP Classroom, it's all over the place in there. So just make sure that you're clear on which countries belong to which region. And then again, the 4 time periods, you want to make sure that you're responding appropriately, correctly within the prescribed time period. And when they're asking for evidence, it needs to be as specific as possible, okay? It's not enough to say there were economic changes due to industrialization. What kind of economic changes resulted from industrialization? Women went back to working in the house, okay? That's an economic change. Wage labor or the middle class emerged, right? Those would be specific examples. It's not enough to say there were political changes or economic changes, okay? So you need specificity when they're asking for evidence. Okay, so what can you do between now and May 11th? Even if you've done nothing to this point, how can you be successful, okay? As I already said earlier, as soon as possible, take a timed practice exam and really hold yourself accountable for that time. What that's gonna do is show you what you need to spend the rest of the time focusing on, okay? We have plenty of time. So 4 weeks before the exam, you can begin reviewing 1 time period per week. And again, practice those skills of contextualization, of sourcing, of writing thesis statements as you review. 2 weeks before the exam, take another timed practice exam. And then you want to focus the remaining study time based on your lowest scoring areas on that second exam. Okay, so you're sort of going to get your baseline of information, you're going to work, you're going to get a second data point with that second exam, and then you're going to really focus in. By the time you get to the night before the exam, don't open a book, don't think about it, don't turn the History Channel on, okay? This is not that kind of a test. You can't cram the night before. And I really wish you could, but you can't, okay? And I promise that it's painfully obvious when that has been the case, okay? It's much more important that you get a good night's sleep, that you limit your screen time so that you have restful sleep the night before, that you eat a good dinner, that you get up in plenty of time to not be rushed, that you have breakfast, that you bring water with you. And then again, please remember, take a deep breath. You can do it, and you're gonna get questions wrong. So don't get discouraged during the exam. Persevere and put an answer for every single question. That's the best way for you to get points, I promise. Okay, so that's enough of me yammering on about the basics of the exam. Let's dig in here, and we're going to look at some sample multiple choice questions. And this is going to be your first chance to interact. So get ready, because we're going to have you answer some questions here. Okay, so again, 55 questions, 55 minutes. That's fast. You don't have time to sit and stare. They're all what College Board calls stimulus based, which means that you're going to be given something to look at, a passage, a chart, a map, a graph, something. And then the next 3 to 4 questions will all be related to that stimulus. You can think of the stimulus as sort of a big fat hint as to what you're supposed to be thinking about, okay? They can ask you anything about history everywhere in the world. The stimulus is going to help you focus in on the time period, on the place, on the theme, okay? If you don't know the answer, guess. There's no penalty, okay? Mark the text as you read. And you need to practice enough to find a strategy that works for you. So if already you're fairly successful on multiple choice exams, don't sort of switch things up now. But if you always struggle to finish on time, or if you feel like you never do very well on multiple choice, then you need to play around with some strategies. Some people, for example, like to read the questions before they read the stimulus, so they know what they're looking for. For some people, that's not helpful at all. Again, there's not one correct way to do it. You really need to find what works for you, but feel free to experiment a little bit between now and the exam to find a system that does work for you. All right, so here's our first question. If we have 55 minutes and 55 questions, that's a minute per question. So I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to give you about a minute to please read the passage, read the first question, and then we'll pop a poll up where you'll have a chance to answer. So let's do 1 minute with this question. All right. Okay, so we have some participation. Okay, which of the following best reflects Confucian values found in the document above? And we have A as an answer, that the lack of income forces the family. A is not the correct answer, okay? Because the question is asking us about Confucian values, all right? So I'm gonna go ahead and move to the next slide, which will show us the correct answer and where in the passage we can get that information. Okay, so the first question after a stimulus can often be answered directly from the stimulus, okay? So in this passage, I highlighted in red, the daughter is 20 but does not have wedding clothes. And then the question is asking me about Confucian values. In Confucianism, it's all about the relationships and the roles that every member of a family and of the community has. Daughters are expected to marry. They're expected to take care of their husbands. Husbands are expected to take care of their wives, okay? So all of these other things are mentioned in the passage, but the correct answer is that the daughter is expected to marry, because that's the only one of these answer choices that is in fact about Confucian values, okay? The next two questions are still about the same passage, but you'll notice that now they're going to be less about the passage, about the stimulus, and more about this time period in China. So again, think of the stimulus as your big fat hint for what you should be thinking of as you work your way through these questions. Okay, so here comes the second question.
Amanda, did you see the poll pop up for that first question?
Yes.
The actual question itself?
Yes.
Because I didn't.
Okay.
But I do see this one, so maybe it was me. If there's anyone participants out there that are having trouble seeing the poll, just throw something in the chat, but it seems to be working for me now, so maybe that was just specific to me.
Take about 15 more seconds. Okay, which of these best describes the status of China's economy in the 13th century? And again, we have A. So I don't know if people are just sticking with A until you get it right, or if that's your actual answer. But the economy was not slowly recovering in the 13th century in China. So again, let's look at the correct answer, which for this question, if I can advance my slides, is B. Okay, China in the 13th century continued to be one of the most powerful economies in the world. So you can see now that while this question is about 13th century China, which we know from the passage, now they want to know what you know about 13th century China. This is the content part of the exam. Do you know something about world history? Okay, so this question involves a little bit of contextualization because they are continuing. So you know that before this, China was powerful. And again, we can sort of do some process of elimination here, okay? The Warring States period was not 13th century, so that's the wrong time period. The economy coming under European influence, that's much later with the Opium Wars. And then the economy rapidly declined at the hands of the Mongol Empire. The Mongol Empire is the correct time period, but under the Mongol Empire, the economy soared, okay? It did not suffer under the Mongols. So D is just incorrect. A and C are both outside of the time period. Okay, so let's do one more question with this passage. And this time we'll just do about 30 seconds with it since this is the same stimulus. All right, in what larger historical process was the family's work participating? This is a pretty typical question stem from College Board, okay? And we've got a split here between C and D. And the correct answer for this question is in fact D, okay? So let's look, I'll go to the next slide and show you. Okay. The production of goods for distribution across trans-regional markets. The big hint for that here is silk. Whenever we talk about China and the economy, we're talking about Silk Roads. We're talking about luxury goods being exported across multiple different trans-regional trade networks, whether it's the Silk Road, the Sand Roads, Indian Ocean trade, but luxury items are flowing out of China and to the rest of the world, okay? So that's our first type of stimulus. That's a passage. We're going to look at one more type of stimulus in the next set of practice multiple choice questions, and that's going to be a map. Okay, so this is going to require some different skills, and we'll see how we do. Okay, so here's our first question. And again, we'll do about 1 minute because this is the first time you're seeing the map. All right, the global balance of power alluded to on the map best reflects which of the following changes in the mid-20th century, okay? And we have a split here between B and D. And so let's talk about some of the key sort of things that we need to pay attention to in this stimulus, okay? It's a world political map, okay? So it's just showing us boundaries of countries. It's not giving us any other information there. But then in the key, it tells us the United States and its allies, the Soviet Union and its allies, and then proxy conflict between forces supported by the United States and the Soviet Union. That word proxy conflict really only gets used one time in world history, and that's during the Cold War, okay? So even though there's the date of 1980 on the map, really what we're talking about is throughout the whole Cold War here. How are these two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, sort of, how is that balance of power, right, changing? Okay, so it wants us to make an inference from these statements, which one is best. The correct answer here is actually C. Okay, the military and economic decline of Western European colonial empires following the Second World War, okay? And the reason that's the correct answer is that all of the proxy conflict, if you notice where all the dots are on the map, this is places that have previously been controlled by European imperial powers, okay? So what's happening in those places, right, is that now there's a struggle for the two superpowers, Soviet Union and the United States, to sort of grab up any of those places that had previously been controlled by other European powers prior to World War II. All right, so same map, next question. I'll give you about 35, 40 seconds.
For those people looking at the recording, viewing the recording of this session, you can always move the polling over to the side if it's blocking the question itself.
Okay, so question number 2 is asking us about the non-aligned Asian and African states shown on the map. So it's all the countries in white on the map, okay? So I don't know if we have poll results. Okay, everybody answered A, and that is the correct answer, okay? These places have been controlled before, and they're super nervous about entering into that sort of relationship again, okay? So they are good students of history. They're wary. They don't want to have the same thing happen. It has already happened to them, some of them very recently. Okay, so A is the correct answer. All right, one more question on this map. 30 seconds.
Amanda, just for reference, we're at 4 o'clock Eastern, so we're about 31 minutes in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, which of the following best explains why the United States and Soviet Union preferred to engage in the type of conflict shown on the map? And the only kind of conflict shown on the map is a proxy conflict. Okay, so we're not talking about direct engagement. So let's see what you all thought. Okay, and we're split between A and B. And the correct answer is, in fact, B. Okay. To avoid direct military confrontations that could lead to nuclear war. So I said earlier that proxy conflict is really only used to reference the Cold War. It's because of this mutually assured destruction idea once the Soviet Union had nuclear technology, okay? They're unwilling to engage in direct military conflict because nobody wants it to go where they think it's going to go, which is that once one side uses nuclear weapons, the other side's going to, and then we're all in trouble. Okay, so instead, they had these other sort of ways of fighting, which again is why the Cold War is called the Cold War. Okay, no direct military action. All right, one last question on this map. All right, so this is the first except question that we've looked at. All of the following contributed to the end of the political order depicted on the map, except. And I always tell my students, except questions are a trick because the right answer is wrong. Mm-hmm. So if, again, you struggle, if you struggle with timing, except questions are good ones to leave until the end because they can really take a lot of time because you're gonna either see the first answer and say, yes, that was true. But that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for the one that isn't true. So you really have to carefully look at all 4 of the answer choices for the except questions. Okay, and we're split again between A and B. And those are both correct, which means that they're not correct for an except question. Both of those things did contribute. So the correct answer for this multiple choice question is actually D. Okay, the political order that's depicted on the map is about all of these other territories and places that the United States and Soviet Union are struggling for. And so the first 3 do contribute to the end of that political order. The armed rebellions in Eastern Europe against Soviet rule don't contribute to that. That happens afterwards and is unrelated to these proxy wars that are happening in Africa and Asia in particular. Okay, so that is going to do it for our multiple choice practice. Again, it's 55 questions in 55 minutes. Give yourself permission to get some wrong and don't waste time. You got to get all of them answered. The last thing I will say about multiple choice is that if you get to a situation where they tell you there's 1 minute left and you have questions that are unanswered, pick one letter. Some teachers call it the letter of the day. Pick the same letter and answer all of the last questions with that same letter. If you do that, statistically speaking, you're going to get 1 or 2 right. Those are just bonus points because you didn't even read the question. If, however, you make a pretty diagram zigzagging back and forth, you can still get all of those wrong, which means that there was no benefit. Okay, so pick the same letter, answer all of the remaining multiple choice questions with that same letter. Okay. All right, so if that didn't hurt your heads enough, let's move into some FRQs where you now have to come up with the whole answer, not just pick from one that's being provided to you. Okay, so the SAQs will happen right after the multiple choice. This is all considered part 1 of the exam. You'll have 40 minutes. And again, this is worth 20% of the exam. Now, here's the really important thing about SAQs. Each one has 3 parts, and those points are earned independently. So you need to answer as many parts as you can, okay? And you need to answer them in separate sentences. You don't jam them all together into a paragraph. This should be part A and a sentence to answer it, part B and a sentence or 2 to answer it, and part C and a sentence or 2 to answer it, okay? On the exam, there will be 4 SAQ prompts. You have to answer the first 2 questions. The first 2 questions will both be based on a stimulus. The first question is on a secondary source. The second question is on a primary source. Then they're going to give you 2 more questions. These are not stimulus based, and you pick one to answer. When I say pick one, you're going to still answer all 3 parts of the one that you choose. Okay, so you want to choose wisely. They're about different time periods. So they're usually about a similar historical development or theme, but question 3 is going to have happened between 1200 and 1750. And question 4 will be more modern, 1750 to 2001. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is sort of be self-aware of which time periods are your strength. And you've got time here, 40 minutes to answer 3 questions. And really all you're writing is 9 sentences in 40 minutes. So you have some time to really make a good choice, and pick the prompt that you can answer at least one part to, right? Or multiple parts to. Don't just lock in because you've decided that you're better at the earlier time periods. Read both questions and then choose the one that you feel like you can be more successful on, okay? The other thing to keep in mind is that for all of the FRQs, there's always more than one way to answer each part correctly, okay? So don't feel like you have to keep going and explain. You say one thing correctly, you're going to get the point, and that's it. So this is not the place to expand. This is not the place to provide contextualization. That will happen in the second half of the exam in the long essays. Here, it's really just 1 or 2 complete sentences. Get your point and move on, okay? So here is a practice SAQ, okay? This is one with a stimulus, okay? So we have here an engraving of the shipyard of the Dutch East India Company, 1726 in Amsterdam, okay? And the directions say to use the image above to answer all parts of the question that follows. And see, here's our 3 parts, A, B, and C. A says, identify one way in which the image reflects political changes in the global balance of power in the 18th century. Notice that political is bolded and underlined. It's because they really want you to give an answer that's political. Don't talk about the economy. Don't talk about social changes. For part A, they just want you to name one political change, okay? Part B, describe the broader historical situation in Eurasia at the time of the image. This is the skill of contextualization. What else is going on? Okay, so we haven't really talked about contextualization yet, but imagine that your grandparents come for dinner, and of course they love you and they care about you and they want to know what's going on in your life. Okay, you can't just start talking about the new TikTok that you saw without first explaining what TikTok is, who the TikToker that you're following is, right? What came before it. They need some context, some information that came before your story to help them make sense of your story. Contextualization for AP World History is the same, okay? What's happening in the world at this time that's allowing these changes to happen? And we know that changes are happening because both of the other parts of the question are asking us about changes, okay? So what's happening that's causing these changes? That's what part B is asking. Part C, explain one way in which the event depicted in the image reflects economic changes in Eurasia in the 18th century. So notice that they're giving you a time period. They're telling you if they want it to be political or economic. So earlier when I said, please answer the question that's being asked, this is a prime example of that, okay? You might know a whole lot about the Dutch East India Trading Company, but if you don't focus what you know to respond to those prompts, you potentially will not get points, okay? This isn't just dump everything you know about it. You want to answer as precisely as possible, okay? So let's look at what some of these answers might look like. Okay, and again, please notice that there's more than one possible correct answer. Any of these would earn the points. Okay, so for part A, the event depicted in the image reflects the growing power of European states. The success of the Dutch East India Company demonstrates how some European joint stock companies contributed to expanding European power across the world, or European powers were competing for political dominance through the establishment of maritime empires. All of those are correct. These are not the only correct responses for part A, okay? And every summer we get some answers that we add to our list. So we start with a list of things that we think might be the common answers. But it doesn't mean that if your answer isn't on our list, you won't get the point. If your answer is historically accurate, you will still get the point, okay? So for part B, this is the historical situation. So this was our contextualization question. What's going on in the world? European powers are engaging in long distance trade for the first time. Technological advances in sailing and navigation are making long distance trade possible. Joint stock companies are operating with the same powers as political states. That was a major change. And maritime empires are being established by Eurasian states. Okay, so all of these again would explain a little bit about what's causing these changes that the engraving depicts. And then finally, economic change. The image reflects the growing power of European merchants and companies over trade and commerce. The image illustrates how Europeans were able to use their economic power through joint stock companies, or the image shows how competition between European mercantilist states and companies allowed Europeans to gain greater access to and control over foreign markets, okay? So those are three possible answers for that SAQ, okay? This is what it's going to look like on the exam. The directions will say answer either question 3 or question 4. And this is what an SAQ with no stimulus looks like. So number 3 is all about the Columbian Exchange. Remember, this is question 3 is always going to be our earlier time period. Question 4 is going to be about the same theme. It's still about global trade, but it's now the second half of the 20th century. So this is super specific. They only want you to talk about 50 years here, okay? The second half of the 20th century is all that they're giving you here, okay? So again, you might want to read through all 3 parts, A, B, and C for both questions before you decide which one you want to answer. That's going to also give you some time to brainstorm and think. And then you want to make the best choice possible, okay? So I am going to scroll through what possible responses to these questions might look like. I'm not going to read every word of it to you. I'm just going to leave it on the screen for a minute. And then if you want to watch it back, it'll be there for you. Okay, but here are our possible answers for number 3, all 3 parts, A, B, and C. So again, please remember there's multiple possible ways to earn the point for all the questions, but also notice how specific, okay? For the first part A, the spread of navigation technologies such as astrolabes, okay? So that's a specific piece of evidence that shows that you understand what new navigation technologies meant. And so any chance you have to be specific, it's going to benefit you. And here are the possible answers for question number 4, which was global trade in the second half of the 20th century. So the last thing I'll say about SAQ 3 and 4 and making a choice is that it really isn't a trick. Nobody cares which one you answer. So if you didn't get this far in your class for whatever reason, or you don't have any idea about more modern history, please do the best you can with the Columbian Exchange question, right? Put as much down there as you can think of. So it's really up to you, and there's not one right answer. Okay, the dreaded DBQ. The DBQ is the first long essay question you will see. You don't have a choice, and you will always be provided with 7 documents, okay? This one essay is 25% of your overall exam score, so you need some points here. The good news is they're giving you the documents. If you can talk about 3 of the documents, you're gonna get a point. So when I say, please don't leave it blank, I really mean it, okay? You don't even really have to think very much to get 1 point on the DBQ. If you can read and comprehend 3 of the 7 documents and talk about them, you're going to get a point, okay? It's recommended that you spend 15 minutes reading and planning, and I will emphasize the planning part, okay? You do not want to simply summarize the 7 documents, and there's nothing more painful on day 13 of the reading when I've already read, I don't know, 12 or 1300 essays, to get yet another in order summarized list of the 7 documents that I have memorized at this point. Okay, so the planning matters. You don't have to talk about the documents in order. And in fact, it often shows that you understand them better if you don't. Organize them in a way that makes sense to answer the prompt, okay? And you can combine them in other ways, okay? So as I said earlier, the good news is that the points on the rubric can and will be awarded separately, which is where the partial credit comes in. So you got to get something on the page so you can get some points, okay? So let's look at what that might be, okay? The only point that has to occur in a particular location in your essay is the thesis. The thesis has to either appear in the first or the last paragraph of your essay. Notice I just said paragraph. That means you should be making more than 1 paragraph in your essay, okay? And you can designate that paragraph by either indenting or skipping a line, but you should have that level of organization in your response for both long essay questions, okay? So the thesis has to either be in the first paragraph or the last paragraph. It cannot be anywhere else to earn the point. That's the only point that's really like that. Contextualization is a second point. To me, it makes the most sense that this is in your introduction, because this is, again, you showing that you understand what has going on in the world, what happened before, and you're sort of bridging that to your thesis, what you're claiming to be true, okay? But it doesn't have to be in the introduction. That's just where logically it makes the most sense. On the DBQ, you can earn up to 3 points for evidence, okay? So 1, if you use 3 of the documents, you can show us that you understood what the documents were saying about the topic. You get 2 points if you support an argument using at least 6 of the documents. So notice that not only are you using more of the documents, you're using them in a more purposeful way to support the claim you made in your thesis, okay? This is why putting them together, pairing them up, especially if they are very similar, or if they're polar opposites, right? If they're saying 2 very different things, sometimes that's a great place to put them together in your essay and talk about this side says this side says this, right? And that's how this supports my claim, okay? You can get a 3rd point for evidence on the DBQ for providing 1 piece of evidence that is beyond what is provided in the document. So this is often referred to as EBD, or evidence beyond the documents. This is a history test. This is your chance to show what you know about the topic that's being referenced in all 7 of these documents, okay? So anything that you know that's not already present in one of the documents can earn you another point, okay? Now, the last category, analysis and reasoning, is the hardest, okay? And again, if you're struggling, get your evidence points, get your thesis, get your contextualization, move on with your life. 5 points on a DBQ is going to get you a long way towards a passing score, okay? The first point is for sourcing at least 3 of the documents, okay? And there's 4 ways to source a document, and we'll look at that more closely in a minute. But this is hard, and if you've not started it yet, start tomorrow, okay? Because this is a harder skill, and that's why it's in this last category. And then the final point is for complexity. My students always from day one want to know how to get the complexity point. Okay. There isn't one way to get it. It's complex. That's why it's called complexity. Complexity means that you have a stellar answer in all ways. Everything about it is exemplary. Okay. This isn't really something you practice for. This is something that comes with time, with maturity, with more experience. And so don't worry about complexity. Worry about the things that are much easier to do, especially in a timed setting, okay? All right, so here's our sample prompt. And again, this wording is very typical for College Board. Evaluate the extent to which the experience of the First World War changed relationships between Europeans and colonized peoples. Okay, they love evaluate the extent to which. What that means is that your answer has to say how much or how little it did. How much or how little did it influence this? How much or how little did it change these relationships? Okay, and your answer can be anywhere on that spectrum. And they're going to give you documents that can be used to answer anywhere on that spectrum. Okay, always on the exam, they're going to give you this little bulleted list that reminds you what your essay should do. The reason this is important is that each bullet represents one of the points on the rubric. So you can use this literally on the day of the exam as a checklist. Did I include my thesis? Yes, check. Did I provide contextualization? Yes, check. Did I use at least 6 documents in support of my argument? Yes, okay, so use it as a checklist. So I've included all 7 documents here. We are clearly not going to write a DBQ in our time together today, but just a couple of things to notice, okay? They will give you what they call the source information for each document, okay? This is going to give you who is speaking. It's going to give you the time. This is super important information, okay? And this is going to help you in your response in multiple ways. One of the ways it's going to help you is by grouping the documents together, okay? The other way it's going to help you is that this is giving you a big shove towards the sourcing point, okay? So the documents are all short. You do need to read all of them. And again, that active reading where you're annotating the documents as you go through is beneficial. Not all of the documents will be text, okay? So this third document is a postcard, okay? And again, it's important that you read every page or every word that's on the page. Below the image, it says, they're explaining, this is a reference to the fact that German wartime propaganda often depicted colonial troops in the French and British armies as savages, okay? This is a hint, big fat hint, to understanding what the message on the postcard is, okay? So they're giving that to you for a reason. Use it, take advantage of it, okay? And then here's our next 2 documents. And notice that some of them are very short. And then finally, 6 and 7, okay? It's true for these 7 documents, and it's often true that they give them to you in chronological order, okay? So this last document is from 1982. Again, pay attention to the dates when you're reading these documents, because it's going to help you in crafting your response, okay? So there are 3 basic ways to earn the thesis point, and those are in purple on the slide. The first is to establish a line of reasoning that evaluates the topic of the prompt, okay? So this one simply says the experience of the First World War greatly changed the relationship. So the evaluate the extent to which, that's all you really have to do is label it. Did it really change it? Did it not change it so much? Okay. And then it explains why, okay? Because the war showed that Europeans needed those troops to fight their wars. Okay, so their dependence on their colonial empires was more than economic, okay? And so we've got a couple different examples there. This next one, in English, it might be called a closed thesis because they're going to give us the categories. Europeans continue to view colonized peoples as inferior. A few small cultural changes did not make any meaningful steps toward giving them greater rights or self-rule. So you're going to expect to see those things again as the body paragraph organization. Okay. But again, look at all the different ways you can earn the thesis point, and it can be relatively straightforward. Okay. Contextualization. Okay. Again, this is bridging the gap between what's happened in the world prior to the prompt. Okay, so you could talk about the causes of the First World War. You could talk about European empire building in South Asia. You could talk about the scramble for Africa. You could talk about cultural, economic, or racial justifications for imperialism. All of those things would help to explain the extent to which this experience of war changed their overall relationships. Okay, and so again, I've given you an example here on the slide. Okay. Notice that contextualization can't just be the phrase. You need some explanation. We need to understand that you see how these things develop over time and across places. That's why they're called historical developments, okay? Evidence beyond the documents, you would have to pull something out that's not given to you in the documents, okay? So there's a couple different things here. And then again, there's an explanation in blue as to why it counts as evidence beyond the document, okay? And I wanna make sure we get to the LEQ and questions. So I'm not gonna read all of this to you, but it's there for your reference. Okay, so notice that the writing got smaller. Sourcing is hard, okay? It just is. And you have several choices. You can talk about the significance of the author's point of view. This is not English point of view. We're not talking about first person, second person, third person. We're talking about who this person is, how their experiences in the world are changing, are impacting how they're interacting with the world or how they're viewing a particular topic. Okay, so a simple example of point of view would be that before I had my own children, right? I didn't pay attention to kids riding their bikes in the streets. Once I became a mother, now that's something about me that's true, that changed my view of the world. I became very concerned, even for other people's children in the street, because now I knew what it meant to be a mother and to have children, okay? So for history, it's gonna be the experiences people have. And a common one would be that a ruler of a country might feel an obligation or a responsibility to do things that they wouldn't normally do on behalf of the people they're representing. That might be an example of point of view. Because they are the leader, they're doing X, Y, and Z, okay? So point of view is one way to source. Purpose is another way. What are they trying to accomplish, okay? And that sounds easy, and it's hard. It's much harder to do, okay? You also can establish the historical situation of the source. So it's like contextualization, but just for that one source, okay? And again, the reason this is hard is that you have to do this for 3 different documents correctly to earn 1 point. So if we're worried about time management, sourcing is not where you should spend your time. Get the evidence, get the thesis, get the contextualization, because those are going to take less time than the sourcing, okay? And then again, complexity, and I have seen complexity. I don't want you to think that complexity doesn't happen or that people don't earn this point, because absolutely they do. Complexity, notice in all the blue here where it says explains nuance, explains relevant and insightful connections, okay? This really is the overall quality of the response being above and beyond, okay? I should also say here that we're not scoring your spelling, we're not scoring your grammar. As long as those things are not keeping us from understanding what it is that you're trying to say, those things will not impact your score, okay? Only the points on the rubric are what will be scored. All right, last one. We're almost there, guys, okay? LEQ, 6 points possible. 1 for the thesis and claim, 1 for contextualization, 2 for evidence. Here's the difference. They're not giving you anything on the LEQ. The DBQ, they gave you all the documents and all you have to do is use them, okay? The LEQ, all of the evidence has to come out of your head. So again, it's probably beneficial when you get to part 2 of the exam to flip forward, read those LEQ questions and start thinking about already. Your brain is really good at sort of working in the background on something else. If you wait until the very end to read the questions, you're giving yourself less time to generate the evidence that you need for your response. Okay, and then the same 2 points for analysis and reasoning, using historical reasoning, and then the 1 point for complexity, okay? This point, historical reasoning, is really going to be how you're going to organize your essay, okay? So it might be compare and contrast, it might be cause and effect, it might be change and continuity over time, but you're going to use that as the structure of your essay, and that's how you're going to get that point, okay? So this is, again, exactly what the page will look like. It tells you to answer question 2 or question 3 or question 4. Now, only answer 1, really, because we can't give you points and we don't get to pick which one we score. We have to score the first thing you answer. We don't have a choice about that. So it does you no good to try to get some points for each of the 3 questions. That's just a waste of time, okay? Pick one and spend the rest of the time you have trying to get as many points as possible for that response, okay? And again, notice that what's different between the 3 questions is the time period. Question 2 is from 1200 to 1450, and it's asking about trade networks. Question 3 is 1450 to 1750. And again, it's talking about the European expansion in parts of Asia. And number 4 is in the 20th century, okay? So again, the difference, they're all talking about economic influence, economic developments. They're just talking about 3 different time periods, okay? Okay, I only gave possible answers here for question number 2 because I wasn't trying to kill all of us, okay? So all of these following slides are possible responses for prompt number 2, which it says on the top of the slide, okay? So this is the oldest question, 1200 to 1450. And for those of you who remember, this is really when we're starting to get things like new commercial practices, such as forms of credit, flying money. This is where we get things like the caravanserai, right? And trading networks are expanding, okay? Contextualization has to be what happened before, okay? So what's going on that's leading to this, okay? We've got new large land-based empires, okay? The increasing commercialization of states such as Song China. This is a big change in China, right? Commercialization, remember, refers to the process where you're not just making things that you need to survive, you're making things on purpose to sell to someone else, which is totally obvious to us because most of us buy every single thing that we need, okay? This, however, was a big and scary change for farmers who now are not growing any food, and they're hoping that they're gonna make enough ceramics to sell, to have enough money to buy the food they need for their family for the whole year. That's a super scary thing, right? And so that happening in places like Song China really led to now this change in the economy and this change in trade in the time period afterwards, okay? So lots of examples of specific evidence here. Camel caravans, camel saddle, the Dow, commercial partnerships in the Mediterranean, again, letters of credit, paper money, right? In China, they called the flying money, okay? Here's examples of what that might look like. Notice that in the LEQ, your evidence, it's possible, can all be in the same sentence. You can sort of make a list, but then you're going to need to explain it a little bit afterwards, okay? So again, this is an essay, it should have multiple paragraphs, and the structure of this essay in particular should be for the historical reasoning skill that you have chosen, okay? Which is what it explains here.
Man, I didn't want to interrupt you, but we flew past the 1 hour mark.
Okay.
We're doing well on time, but just to check it in.
Thank you. Okay, so here's an example of historical reasoning in one sentence. The Mongols' development of commercial infrastructure as well as their financial innovations led to a tremendous expansion of Silk Road's trade. Okay. And again, it's not that complexity isn't possible, but notice how small the writing got because this is much harder to do, okay? So again, and notice the words, right? Relevant and insightful connections, nuance, qualifies the argument. So this just requires a lot. And most of us in the time that's given, this is too much to ask, okay? So unless they just happen to ask you about something that's your passion and you know everything about it, your chances of getting this even in twice the time are slim. So don't worry about it. Get the points you can get and move on, okay? All right, so I'm going to take a break for a couple minutes. I'm going to turn it back over to Bob, who's going to explain an excellent tool that's available to you to use in the next few weeks.
Thanks, Amanda. Just a quick reminder to those on the line and those that are logging in to view the recording. Amanda, thanks very much for what an excellent job you're doing. It's a really thorough review. So thank you for that. And just a reminder to everybody, that all this material is available in the 5 Steps to a 5 guide. We're looking at just over 2 months between now and the test date. So this stuff, really valuable material is in your 5 Steps guide. So quick reminder on that. So I'm going to quickly share my screen. You know what? Can we click one slide, please, Amanda? For those on the line now, if you could take a picture with your phone or quickly jot this down. Let's see, Anya, thank you, Anya, put it in the chat as well. Here's the URL and the access code. The bench prep course, we call it the bench prep course. It's the bench prep piece is probably irrelevant to most of you, but it's our online platform that accompanies the 5 Steps guide. And it's everything that's in the book and all the review materials and sample tests and everything, coursified and available online. So if you go to that URL and you can access, enter your access code, I'll give you 10 seconds more to take a picture or write that down. And then I'll do maybe 5 minutes here just to show you, but the best way for you to see the value of this stuff over the next couple of months is to go in and when you have a chance, use this code and go in and see for it yourself. For those teachers on the line, share this with as many of your students and your fellow co-teachers out there. It's really valuable stuff. And, by attending this webinar or viewing the recording, you're getting this access to this. So please feel free to share it in the next couple of months. All right. So if you can stop sharing, Amanda, and I will jump in. How's that? Can you see that, Amanda? Okay. So I've already gone to the URL and punched in the code just for the sake of time. Click continue. And you're going to be right in. I'm already in here. So all you need to do is add a quick email address, a password. It takes less than a minute to sign up. Confirm. You're not going to get any spam or anything from us. It's just one email you'll see that, oops, I may actually be in here already. My bad. I used a new code. And so for you, only because I'm in here all the day, every day, it's having a hard time reading it. It's not, I added a new code to my existing account. So you should have no problem logging in with a new code if you're going in for the first time. And then when you go in for the first time, you'll see a tutorial, kind of walks you through. I'm just going to stop the share there because I didn't know if there was anything that I shouldn't be sharing there. Bear with me for 1 second. Just taking a second for my computer to load. When you head in for the first time, it'll walk you through a little brief tutorial. And actually, I think World History is the one that we started that feature on. You'll go in, it'll give you something for about 30 seconds that points out all of the features this thing has to offer. Sorry about that. Just 1 second. I'm having a hard time loading here. I'm sorry. It seems to be I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties. So my apologies. Just give it a couple more seconds. Okay. Those of you watching the recording can just fast forward through all this dead air, awkward dead space. This is where I could use some help from my compatriots.
Should we go to some Q&A now and we'll come back to bench prep?
Why don't we see? That's a great idea. Why don't we see, while I have a hard time getting in, if there's any questions that you can answer in the meantime. Thanks, Amanda.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen again just to put that Q&A slide up. It'll give you a time to get done what you need to.
I'm just going to stop my share. I already did that. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So again, here is the bit.ly for the recording. And if you have questions, you can either put it in the chat or you can unmute because there's not that many of us. So you can feel free just to ask me a question. The question can be about anything.
Okay. Before these silences get any more awkward, I'm going to share again because I finally got in. I had to go back out and come back in. So I'm going to share. If you can stop sharing, I got my share. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
Amanda, okay, so real quick, this is where you'll wind up after adding that your access code. The first thing that it will ask you is when your test date is. So you'd put in May 11th, is that right, Amanda?
Correct.
Let's do that now. It's May 11th, that's a Thursday. So you've got exactly 73 days from today to work out a study plan to prepare you for the AP World History exam. And that will update every time you come back in. It's important to remember that you'll be able to get this work through a program on your computer. And also if you download the app onto your phone, if you start on the computer and you get halfway through practice test 1, and then you've got to get on the bus or go somewhere else and you want to log back in on the bus on your phone, it will remember you. It'll start where you left off at the same time. So real quickly, this is a kind of a study plan that it'll measure your progress through all of the subjects that go along. As you go through, it will you can check off all of the sections as you go through. You want to look at the flashcards for the classical civilizations. It'll bring you right to those. Artisan. You can quickly self-grade yourself. I knew that one. Oh, to the next one, Stoicism. Yep, got that one right. Not gonna venture a guess. Help me out there, Amanda.
This is the first monotheistic religion in the world. It originated in Persia. gave us the
Okay.
ideas, the concepts of heaven and hell and good and evil.
I trust you, but I'm going to check the back of the card anyway. Wow. You must be involved in some of this content. I would know for there. So it's a really good course that helps you. It's sort of a self-guided tour through the course. You can do as much or as little as you want. It'll check off the portions that you do so that next time you log back in, you can see where you've been. There's a few games. There's a card picker, card hunter. They're mostly flat, pretty simple flashcard based games, but it's a good way to learn, you know, heading into, you got 2 months before the test, you're on the bus, you want to play sudden death, see how you're doing with your knowledge. There's some games. There's a forum for discussion. There's other students in here. You'll often see something like, hey, what did did you guys get confused on number 19 on practice test 2, and back and forth. It can be helpful to sort of reach out to other students that are in the platform using it at the same time, especially as you get closer to test day. And then this is just an overall breakdown of all the lessons. I've been through a couple and self-graded myself medium. You can, as you go through and you rate your confidence as either high, medium, or low. And that way, the next time you come back in, the ones that you see you rated yourself high on, you won't necessarily have to go back and review. The ones you rated yourself low, that's telling yourself, I got to go back and revisit these certain subject matters. And again, it's everything down here. We talked about, Amanda talked about Silk Road trade and a lot of these things that that we touched on earlier in the program. Everything in here is taken from the book and is, I would say, of critical importance to doing well on the test. You've got, again, I showed you the flashcards earlier. Lots and lots of flashcards in here. These are really great for a study on the go, on the bus and getting a ride to school. You've got a number of practice questions and lots and lots of practice questions. You want to brush up on your Western imperialism. You've got 5 practice questions here. Boom. Get right into it. You can have it settings with either the reviewing the answer on or off. I mean, on, you can see once you guess it. I'm not gonna. Can you eyeball this one, Amanda, and tell me what the right answer is?
Oh,
I'm going to guess C because Manifest Destiny is just seems. Oh no, that can't be right.
no. Probably B. I didn't actually read the passage.
The correct answer is B. So yep, and then you go through to the next one, knock out the 5 questions as you go through, and then you've got your Western imperialism review done. The most important thing you'll find in here is the full-length practice test. And you guys heard Amanda earlier in the presentation relaying the importance, the really critical importance of taking a fully timed test to practice. Here you've got 3. One diagnostic that you really could take first thing when you come into this program, so you know where your areas of strengths and weaknesses are. But then you've got full practice exams with 3 hours and 5 minutes. And you can test yourself in the amount of time you'll be given on the test. And these are great features, really user-friendly, and will give you exactly the practice you need when heading into test day. That's a really quick, there's a lot of fun features here. There's rewards that get unlocked when you spend some time. Lots of things you can find when you poke around yourself. But that's a really brief overview of the things that you'll find in our digital course. Again, maybe we can show the access code and say, in case anyone missed it. Did anyone write in the Q&A? I see. Nope. Hi, Sean. Sean's another one of our AP authors. Good to see you. So that was a quick taste on the digital piece. Please feel free to take that share that code, share that URL with the students out there and other teachers as well. We hope that you'll use it. It's a great tool. Back to you, Amanda.
All right, thank you. And I see a couple questions in the chat. So Sean, you asked, can complexity be in one whole paragraph, like at the end, or should it be consistently throughout the essay? The short answer is it can be either. I've seen it's sort of more natural to do it throughout the essay because it's an extension of each part of the essay, an additional connection or understanding the nuances of the evidence that you're presenting. It can be in a separate paragraph. That's often when, instead of explaining the argument, they're adding a whole other set of information that is somehow related. So it is possible to do it that way. But like I said, it's sort of more natural to have it added consistently throughout the essay because it's showing a level of thinking about everything that you're bringing up in the essay. And then let's see, Luna, is there any point we should focus on more than others? What do you mean by point?
I'm not sure if Luna was talking about the digital piece or the course and review in general. If there's a way you can specify for that for us, Luna, maybe we can come back to it.
I meant like on the essays, is there any point we should focus on getting rather than like wasting our time on some or
So I would for sure try to get the thesis, because if you have a good solid thesis, you can then it opens the door to getting other points later, makes it easier to get those other points. So in the DBQ, for example, you can get evidence if you don't have a thesis, but you're not going to get the 2 points for evidence for using the 6 documents in support of an argument if you haven't made an argument. So so you need the thesis point to get that second evidence point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, last chance. If anyone has any final questions for Amanda, for me, any general questions. Again, the recording will be available. There's your bit.ly. Share this with your colleagues, with your students, let them watch it at home. I think we can all agree that Amanda did a really terrific job on all this. There was a lot of really strong advice from someone who clearly knows the test and spends a lot of time over the summer grading those essays. So please do share it. Amanda, any closing thoughts?
Just like I said, do your best. Perseverance matters. Don't get discouraged. Get something down on every part of the exam and you'll get points. You can do it.
Great. If there's nothing else, we'll sign off. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thanks, Amanda, again, for a terrific presentation. And good luck, everybody. We'll talk to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Take care.